Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we'll be talking about a potentially new World of Warcraft expansion. And we've got some interesting information primarily about Death Knights, and what might be hints at a future World of Warcraft piece of content. What if I told you that possibly allied races are getting, as well as Pandaren, a Death Knight model, or a Death Knight spin for a potentially future expansion for World of Warcraft that is all about Death Knights? There's a lot of information being put out on Wowhead right now, primarily stuff detailing patch 8.3. Some of the stuff is complete, like some of the complete pieces of content that we'll be able to go through, models as well as items and what those items might do, and maybe even class changes, but other stuff is incomplete. A lot of stuff that gets put out on Wowhead is just bits and pieces of information that might be able to be strung together, and you will take current information compared to the older information, and sometimes you're able to get yourself a more clear picture. And this is exactly what happened recently over on Wowhead. A bunch of stuff got put out, and it doesn't seem like this stuff is even primarily have to do with patch 8.3. Just because we have some information being released for patch 8.3 PTR doesn't mean that Blizzard doesn't want to encrypt stuff ahead of time. A lot of the times Blizzard puts in stuff, certain models or certain textures or items that will be used for future World of Warcraft patches or even expansions. With how it feels like with Battle for Azeroth, with N'Zoth raid being the final raid that will wrap up the whole expansion, what could be the future of World of Warcraft remains to be foreseen. But we do have some ideas from the information we are able to gather in this video. So let's get into some of the fun stuff. So it looks like there is brand new models are being put in with the tagline for Death Knight. It looks like, and it doesn't seem like a brand new model, besides one really weird texture pack or like a skin pack for a character, every one of them seems to be legit. You have yourself the Dark Iron Dwarves, the males and the females. You have the High-Mounted Tauren, signified by the feather, as part of their skin pack. You have yourselves the Kultirans males and females. You have yourselves the Zandalari, the Volpera, and the Mechanomes. You have all the new allied races that were added right now with a tag marker for a Death Knight. If you're a fan of allied races, but you also are a fan of a Death Knight, then you really come into a crossroads. If you weren't aware, Death Knights are only able to be played by some of the vanilla World of Warcraft races. Or I guess vanilla, BC, and Cataclysm races. Anything from a human all the way to the Worgen and the Goblins. But none of the allied races have been available to Death Knights since their release. No Void Elves, no Lightforged Janai, no High-Mounted Tauren, or even some of the newer ones that are yet to arrive, the Volpera and Mechanomes. But in this future upcoming update, not saying it'll be a patch, it could be something more, like a whole-blown expansion, we could see Death Knights have a lot more allied races bolstering their ranks. How would that make sense lore-wise? So originally Death Knights were kind of designed or created when Arthas was still the Lich King, but that was way back in the day in Wrath of the Lich King. Lich King himself as a villain has been dead, and there was only one man that's been able to take his place, and that is Bolvar. That is Bolvar, the guy that you would see in some of those Wrath of the Lich King cinematics, the guy leading the charge and the guy that basically did the ultimate sacrifice to become the Lich King to hold the Scourge back for an eternity. We actually get to meet him a couple times depending on what class you have and which artifact weapon you ended up choosing for your character, like Fire Mages and Frost Death Knights. Both of those classes were able to venture into Icecrown Citadel and meet Lich King in one way or another, which was really cool. And there was also a small questline in Battle for Azeroth where you find the Ghost of Old Jin, and you go to all these, I guess, Heralds of the Undeath, one of them being Lich King himself, Bolvar, and have a little chat with him. But the guy hasn't really had that much use since then. Anyway, we do have the actual allied races and some of the gear that they'll be wearing as new Death Knight initiates. We also have a little bit of storyline dialogue between a couple characters, and without giving you guys too many of the spoilers, it does seem that the dialogue does take after the ending, whatever it may be, of Battle for Azeroth. Again, no spoilers, but the dialogue also does eventually segue itself towards Bolvar. Now, if this is a way for post-BFA, maybe pre-expansion for the next expansion, to find a way to add Death Knights into our mist, how would Blizzard go about doing it? The war between the Alliance and the Horde at the beginning of BFA created a lot of casualties. A lot of people, champions, were brought into battle, and some even fell fighting for their faction. So that's a lot of potential big forces for a Lich King, for example, to bring back to life as a new Death Knight in order to bolster the armies of Alliance and Horde. Now, it would be a little bit controversial to start basically reanimating the dead and making Death Knights all over again, but it would make sense to allow allied races to finally be able to be played as a Death Knight. A Volpera Death Knight would seem weird, or even a Pandaren Death Knight, but it does seem like the Blizzard might be setting up for all the new allied races, as well as even Pandaren, which is not a new allied race, to be a potentially viable Death Knight alternative. It does depend on what is going to be the newest threat for future expansion. But if they were to do basically like a Legion 2.0, and not in the way that BFA went around, but rather bring back one of the old favorites of a expansion, like Illidan himself, make him more of a frontline character towards the end of the expansion, and maybe do an expansion about some sort of other bigger threat, although I don't really know what else could be bigger than N'Zoth himself, unless we're talking maybe like old void gods way out, far out, that all they do is just swallow up planets and swallow up life. Maybe something along those lines would be really, really cool. But it could potentially be that that's how we get our Death Knights. Either way, it is basically planned that Death Knights are going to be coming. Now, whether this is going to be a new expansion thing or a new patch, I got a couple of reservations of my own. Of course, it could be a brand new expansion idea, but for me, honestly, I believe it's going to be something that could potentially even be announced this upcoming BlizzCon. Maybe like an idea for Blizzard, maybe in patch 8.3.5, to finally allow us to be able to, once we finish a certain questline, maybe after tackling N'Zoth in patch 8.3, and maybe we'll know a lot more about it with this upcoming BlizzCon. Maybe this is where they'll make the announcement that for patch 8.3, or maybe like a patch 8.4, or a pre-patch to the future expansion, they do want to add more allied races as playable options for the class of Death Knight, just so you can have a little bit more diversity. Hell, even when looking at the Mechagon and the Volpera, I'm actually surprised by some of the class choices for Volpera. The fact that Volpera can be warlocks? What? Really? At least for now, and they might change it in the future. Volpera being shamans isn't really uncommon. Volpera being like monks, or Mechagnomes being monks is, I guess, not all that uncommon, but Volpera warlocks does sound a little bit weird. And if Volpera can be warlocks, why can't Dalaran be warlocks? Either way, it's a lot of questions that are yet to be answered, and I cannot wait for them to be answered at this upcoming BlizzCon, and I hope that they do. However, if this is a setup for a future expansion, maybe Blizzard is dropping in files right now to eventually have an expansion that is centered about resurgence of Death Knights, it does make me question, could the expansion leaks, or quote-unquote leaks, of Shadowlands still be a real deal? With all the leaks for Shadowlands, we were expecting a Stormwind raid, and instead we got a N'Zoth raid, which I think is like 12 times cooler than anything. But with a N'Zoth raid, could Shadowlands still be a real expansion for the future of World of Warcraft? And does make me question, how would the Death Knights end up playing into it? Basically, think about what are some of the characters we'll be seeing. Are we going to be seeing Helya again? This is probably going to be the expansion where Sylvanas makes her entrance and finally makes some sense into some of her crazy plans that have been going on. Unless her plan is literally just to, cause everyone to die. N'Zoth is a big enemy. Eventually, even he will bow to the Master of Death. Who could all these big creatures, big characters be that had to do with Masters of Death? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Either way, I'm super excited to see where this ends up going. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. What do you think if they added Death Knights to the table as a playable class for the future of WoW? I think it'd be kind of cool, but you guys let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this update, and I'll see all of you in another video.